Welcome to the broadcast, my dear old fruits, and thank you for dropping by to see me. I want to ask a favour for those of you who live and dwell in London. Will you leave a comment for me and let me know where in London you live? I say this because I hear a lot from everybody around the kingdom, fruits from all over the globe, from the most exotic climes. But I rarely in the comments pick up anybody saying, oh, I'm a fellow Londoner. And I'm not talking about people with ancestors that lived in London. I don't want to hear about all of that today. I want to hear from people who live near me here in London. Which neighbourhood are you from? How long have you lived there? What's your local? This kind of things like that. It'll be interesting for me to read through and have a look. So I thank you in advance for that. Now, a few little interesting things coming up today. Another letter to show you, a piece of ephemera. There's been so much that's interconnected with what's been going on this week. For example, in the last broadcast I spoke to you about the Lascelles family and showed you a letter involving Angela Lascelles, and then we have the death of a jazz singer this week, which is actually connected to the Lascelles family, and that is further connected to the Duke of Windsor, which is connected to the Wales and a possible new home for them. It's quite serendipitous how this has all come up. But I'll start on this by reading a comment from Susan Ashcroft, thank you Susie dear, who said, I have just heard Cleo Laine died today, River, at the age of 97. This was just after my broadcast came out, I think 2 days ago. One of the first comments told me that she had died, which I didn't know. I don't know if you like her music, but I enjoyed her music. Rest in peace, dear lady, now reunited with her husband and fellow musician, Johnny. Now, this was so very timely, these sad tidings. I showed you a letter from Norman Hartnell, who designed the Queen's coronation gown and her wedding gown, to Angela Lascelles, if you recall. Well, I also happen, by total chance, to have a letter to Angela Lascelles from Cleo Laine as well. Yeah, I do. You couldn't make it up, could you? This letter actually implies certain connections to royalty and to a king. In fact, I'll show you in just a second. But for those who don't know, Cleo Laine died a couple of days ago at the age of 97. She was born in October 1927. She was born Clementine Dinah. And she became Lady Dankworth, actually, because she married the late John Dankworth, who became Sir John. He was an English jazz composer and a band leader and a very big figurehead in jazz. And she was a jazz singer, as many of you will know. Of course, she was one of the most, if not the most successful female jazz singer from the kingdom. She was noted for an expertise, although she didn't do it that often really, but an expertise in, if you'll pardon the expression, scat. Scat singing. And the interesting thing is she was mixed race, half Jamaican. Different mix to Meghan because her influence was from the West Indies, Jamaica, whereas Meghan's, as we all know, 43% Nigerian, so slightly different in that respect. But Cleo Laine, decades before the likes of Meghan Sussex came onto the scene, was embraced and accepted into all of these worlds, very upper class worlds as well as the other classes throughout the kingdom. She was embraced into all of this decades ago, into the type of world that the types of Meghan Markle claim are frictive and full of undercurrents of microaggressions and unconscious bias and all of this, that and forth. And as you can see from the photographs, they do not share a dissimilar complexion, do they? In certain lights, if it wasn't for the afro hair, one could almost take Cleo Laine for white, if one was to ponder on it. But they share that really rather lovely café au lait look to the complexion. She was a great talent, for sure. I will say that her repertoire was not my cup of tea. She was none of the songs that she was hugely associated with rang my bell, if you want to put it that way. I appreciate her talent, and I like to look at her and listen to her at times, but her repertoire covered a lot of the musicals as well. Now, you might think, well, River, you like the musicals. I do to a certain extent. Hammerstein, going back to Gershwin, Kander and Ebb sometimes, but she was more along the sort of Sondheim direction, this sort of thing. Actually in the sort of vein that Liza Minnelli would sometimes go down with her influence, Charles Aznavour. And I don't like all of that. I mean, I have a great appreciation for its craft, but it's not something that I listen to, if you understand. There are other sort of jazz styles as well that I love to listen to, and I do listen to a lot of jazz and see a lot of it live, and I absolutely adore it. The best I've ever seen was actually in The Hague, and some in Rotterdam actually. It's a cafe there called Dizzy's, but that was some of the best jazz I've ever seen in my life, but heard I should say. But she was highly decorated. She was awarded the OBE in 1979, and then she became DBE in 1997, so she was known as Dame Cleo Laine, although she didn't brandish that honour. And actually this letter that I have refers to that appointment. Her husband John was knighted in 2006, but I will read this letter to you from Cleo Laine to Angie Lascelles, and it reads, 27th of June 1997, and it was written at their home, the old rectory in Milton Keynes, which is actually where now you will find a concert venue, a very popular, very successful venue called the Stables or the Stables Theatre, which is actually constructed in the grounds of what was their house. It was founded by Cleo and John in this converted stable block, and it hosts hundreds of concerts every year, summer camps, all this kind of thing. It's an absolutely huge success to this day. And if you didn't catch the broadcast, just to briefly explain, Angela Lascelles was married to Gerald Lascelles, who was the late Queen's cousin, very tightly knit with the royal family. Dearest Angela, thank you for adding to my enjoyment of my recent honour by sending your congratulations. I was truly thrilled and haven't come down to earth yet. It should take a year or two. I have very fond memories of our visits to Fort Belvedere and the Duke. And that's actually where it gets rather interesting, because I can only assume, and you might be able to tell me differently or otherwise, but I can only assume that she is talking about the Duke of Windsor. It could be Duke Ellington for all I know, but I think that's rather unlikely, from the world of jazz. I'm interjecting during the editing just to say that actually it is just as likely that the letter could refer to Duke Ellington, because Gerald Lascelles, who was a music critic and loved the jazz scene, knew him, and it was he who recommended Duke Ellington's orchestra to his brother Lord Harwood for a music festival in 1958, of which the Queen and Prince Philip would be guests of honour. So that is a distinct possibility. Perhaps you can enlighten me. But the other possibility is that she could be talking about their times together with the Duke of Windsor, who abdicated from his role as the king, King Edward VIII, as he was. Because as well as Fort Belvedere being his home, the Duke of Windsor was also godfather to Gerald Lascelles. And he abdicated while he was in Fort Belvedere, which was his home, as the Prince of Wales, and it was the site of his abdication in 1936. Now it's leased to private tenants. I believe actually the Westerns of Canada leased it for a very long time. And some of their descendants might still be there, but I know that in 2021 the circumstances changed. However, it remains Crown Estate property, and it's part of Windsor Great Park. I think it's right at the extreme south side of Windsor Great Park. And after the abdication of Edward, it was unoccupied for 20 years or so, and it became offices during the wars. Many of these great country houses and piles did. And in 1953, Angela's husband, Gerald, bought the 99-year lease. That's how it ended up in their hands. And Gerald was the son of Mary, Princess Royal. Cleo continued, I don't know if we will be anywhere near in the future. We spend so much time in the US these days, but if we have a day of freedom from touring, or we are near, we will get together. John sends his love. It was so good to hear from you. Love, Cleo. And I thought it might be interesting for those of you who haven't seen it to actually read Edward's Instrument of Abdication from 1936. I, Edward VIII of Great Britain, Ireland, and the British Dominions beyond the seas, I love that. Sounds so grand, doesn't it? King, Emperor of India, do hereby declare my irrevocable determination to renounce the throne for myself and for my descendants, and my desire that effect should be given to this instrument of abdication immediately. In token whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 10th day of December, 1936, in the presence of the witnesses whose signatures are subscribed. Signed at Fort Belvedere in the presence of his three brothers, you see there, Albert, who was known as Bertie, and who went on to become George VI, and was the father of the late Elizabeth, Henry, Duke of Gloucester, George, Duke of Kent. And you'll see the King, as he abdicated, signed Edward R.I., which is Rex Imperator, which means King Emperor, because of course it had the involvement, he was Emperor of India. And that's why you don't see Charles signing off R.I., he is simply King. So Charles R, because we lost India. Well, isn't it curious how the timing of all of this squares the circle? Because today's splash in all of the headlines say from cottage to castle, Kate and William consider leaving cosy Adelaide Cottage for a much grander home. And there's a nod to William's size beneath. And it seems that there are claims, which did do the rounds a few years ago before they moved to Adelaide, but there are claims renewed that the fort, as it's sometimes known, or Belvedere as I've always known it to be quite honest, is under consideration for a move for the Wales family. Now, they've spent the last 3 years at Adelaide Cottage, and they love it there. And it suited their purposes, my understanding, as it's been a great success. Wonderful for the children. But we must consider the fact that the future necessitates practicalities that need to be considered, various functions, including domestic but also administrative and perhaps more ambassadorial, William likes to keep his life small and quiet, I should say cosy and familial, but he also understands that he's a king in waiting. And Belvedere is set in 59 acres. It was built in the 18th century, Gothic revival. And like Adelaide, it's on the Windsor estate, so it's not as if they need to move far. Now, I promise you this isn't just sour grapes because of the fact that I couldn't afford to live somewhere like Belvedere or somewhere even a tenth of that size, even if I wanted to. It's not sour grapes. But although I appreciate the spaciousness of these larger places, and I could do with some more space myself, trust me, I actually know that I wouldn't feel right at all in a very large house. Even when I was in some of the very large hotel suites that you saw me in, I think I showed you 3 of them earlier in the month, as gorgeous as they are and as lovely, I find them too large, and as you know, I'm rather tall. I'm 6'1", and getting from one side of the room to the other, even in those suites, not even an entire house, was exhausting for me. So I've never envied the likes of royalty or anybody else who has an extremely large abode like that. I'd find it exhausting. Up and down the stairs all day, this sort of thing. Of course, there are many country houses which are arranged, and palaces in a certain way, where you have your cosy spaces, your suites, your living spaces, where you don't have to get about so much. But the thought of all the upkeep and the maintenance and dealing with the staff and all of this sort of thing is energy that I would rather put elsewhere, do you understand? Not that I'm in a position to be able to pick and choose such things anyway, but it'll be interesting to see what emerges regarding those rumours, won't it? Now, regarding Prince Harry, reports are coming to light that he's been sucking up to par by offering to share his official diary engagements to further reduce tensions and avoid clashes. Well, they're pointing to incidents like the recent Angola trip, which clashed with the 78th birthday of Queen Camilla and apparently knocked her off some of the front pages. A new diary sharing arrangement is believed to extend to Prince William's court even. Well, my understanding is that this was actually a way for Harry to oil his way back into the lowest levels of communication. The lowest levels. Staff meeting staff. A way for them to oil back in and feel as if they are working with the palace and coordinating with them, and that they're part of the team, that Harry's a viceroy and a king in waiting, and all of that jazz, a crack in the door. My understanding is that actually this was very perfunctory from Buckingham Palace's side, not oversharing information to the Harkles, and the big dates from the side of the palace are already known. So it doesn't take the likes of Mains and Maguire Harry and Meghan's goons to unearth Queen Camilla's birthday, for example, does it? You know, they have that sort of information. They know when a state visit is due. So it's not as if Buckingham Palace has to offer or proffer them anything. You can just consult your wife's diary, Harry. I'm sure it's in there in black and white. A source said before that meeting between their aides in London, conflicts of interest or clashes of publicity were relished and even perhaps encouraged by the Sussexes. Now Harry has shifted into a new way of thinking. The tone is now all about deconflicting with his family. I ask you. That's why his household agreed to draw up a grid of his activities and share them with Buckingham Palace and by extension with Kensington Palace. Harry still doesn't like being controlled by royal machinery, and that won't change. However, if the royal family have full sight of his movements, they can at least plan accordingly. It's a significant gesture. Oh, how magnanimous! Oh, aren't they wonderfully generous, these Harcourts? So you're expecting the king to work around your schedule, is basically what you're trying to tell us. I am sorry to break it to you, Harry and Meghan, but actually the king couldn't care less. He could not care less about your schedule or what you're doing, and nor can his representatives from the palace, because all the publicity that you get from your goings-on is actually bad and reflects pretty well on the palace. It's done a reversey-persy, and all your front news headlines actually seem to end up benefiting the crown anyway. And I'm afraid it's more bad news for the Harkles. What a shame. Involving Meet Me on Ricky Lake. Remember all of this drama? It's actually been 2 years or more since this project was trumpeted, and we heard all about it, and we knew that it wouldn't amount to very much. You know, it would go the way of Pearl, a drop in the ocean. And of course I understand that these developments can take years. You know, splendid projects can take years to be formed. I'm not naive about that. But this Canadian author, Carly Fortune, the romance novelist, sold the rights to her book, didn't she? Meet Me at the Lake, and I wish her every success, by the way. I really do, nothing against the gal. But despite her name, Carly Fortune, she had the misfortune to mix with Archewell Productions. If you remember at the time, she said, I'm so thrilled about working with Netflix and Archewell to bring Meet Me at Ricky Lake to the screen. Will and Fern's love story is dear to my heart, and I can't imagine a more perfect partnership. Perhaps now you can. Perhaps now you can, because progress is moving very slowly, like treacle or tar, isn't it? And page 6 say that no director is attached as yet, and that they are nowhere near casting. And the rumour is that Netflix paid about $3 million for the rights. So the quiz is, what exactly will be Archewell's role after September 25, when the initial contract with Netflix ends? And what exactly can Archewell bring to the table anyway? Jam and flower sprinkles? Now, regarding keepsakes, I thought I'd shown you the final photograph, but another one came in. And also, I may be offering further keepsakes to those of you who are still waiting. I still have hundreds of emails from people who weren't able to get a keepsake simply because there's only so many hours in the day that I can get around to doing this and organising it and administrating it and getting all the stuff together. So if anybody will be getting a keepsake in future, those are the first in line that remain there for me to go through. But in the meantime, thank you to Laurie Jones, who sent in these delightful photographs with her beagles, Sophie and Dashiell. Isn't this wonderful? They look so sweet. With Sophie presumably in fascinator and pearls and a brooch, and then Dashiell in a hat and red velvet. The souvenir says, by no cold shadow overcast, but warm with peace and love, sweet in remembrance when 'tis past, so may the new year prove. And I do get dog envy when I see cute ones like your beagles, my dear. They look so patable and huggable. But yeah, when it comes to children and dogs, I like both of them on a part-time basis. I don't actually wish to divulge to you whether or not I'm a parent, whether or not I'm already one, or am planning on being one. I don't wish to divulge that kind of information. But regardless, what I will tell you is that I do not have the infinite patience that some mothers and fathers have, or dog owners. I know that about myself. I just do not. And the same thing actually goes for companions of mine. I could never never share the same bed with the same person every night of my life. No, no, I cherish and relish time in solitude way too much. And as much as I absolutely adore the company of others, and I really, really do, I'm also very comfortable spending time with myself, and actually I need it to recharge me. And when it comes to the children in my life, I am very doting, I'm very loving, very caring, and I consider myself extremely present when I choose to spend time with them. But I like it in small doses. I just do. I like it in small doses. It would be the same with the dog. And I often find myself agreeing with my spirit animal, my key influence in life, Baroness Shader from Sound of Music, our dear Elsa. Haven't you ever heard of a delightful little thing called boarding school? Yeah, it's all about nannies and boarding school for me, my dear. Thank God for nannies and boarding school. I have no interest at all in playing taxi driver, chauffeur a million times a day, constructing things, inane television shows that you watch day after day after day, hour after hour, year after year after year. Hell, absolute hell. I just couldn't do it, could not do it. Hats off to you, I suppose, if that's your bag, but it's not mine, and I know that about myself. Now, reading to children is something that I do enjoy, as long as they're attentive, which they usually are. I like reading to children. I find it gratifying. I like going for walks in nature with children. That is very gratifying, getting out and about at all times of year. But, to be honest with you, I enjoy the company of toddlers when they're really squadgeable. Sort of 2, 3, 4 is really, 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 really lovely. But any older than that, no thanks until about the age of 30. Then you can come back to me and we can have some nice conversations, my dear. But I am not one of those who is enchanted with children in all their shapes and forms and stages for hours on end every single day. No, I'm just not. And it's the same when it comes to doggies. You see, that's why I don't have any dogs yet. One day I will. One day I will get round to doing it. But there will certainly be others involved in the dog's care so that they are not needing to be by my side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No, thank you very much. But I appreciate, there are those of you who wouldn't have it any other way and love all of that. It's horses for courses, isn't it? Vive la différence. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I've got a feeling this is a shorter broadcast than usual, but that's all I could rustle up for you today. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Remember to leave me a comment if you're a fellow London dweller. And if you care to treat me to a little tip for a Sunday, then the tip jar is in the description box. Thanks for dropping by. Take care and toodle pip.